It is less than 48 hours to the landmark date that Nigeria became an independent sovereign state. Tonight, Babajide Ogunsanwo, founder of Leadership by Data and Channels Television's data analyst, is right here to share more insights about Nigeria's development journey since 1960. Babajide, great to have you again.
Good evening, Ayatollah.
All right, so 64 years of nationhood, October 1st, which is very, close by. But let's start by looking at Nigeria as it was back then in 1960. Babajide, how different was Nigeria then compared to the Nigeria of today? What are the facts? Is Nigeria still holding on to the visions of the leaders of yesteryears, of the founding fathers?
Looking at it, 64 years, but there's a particular way I would like to look at it tonight, and that's, in all these 64 years, there are different ways to look at it. Some people look at the 64-year journey. Some people look at half of it, which is the first 32 years after 1960, and then that takes us to 1992, and then 32 years after 1992 brings us to 2024. In simple terms, I would like us to divide 64 years, and if this represents the 64 years, so in simple terms, here's what I mean. First half of the 64 years, 1960 to 1992, if this were the statistics, what does this mean? This is Nigeria, 1960 to 1992, first of 32 years. Now, what of Nigeria, 1992 to 2024? In simple terms, Nigeria of the first 32 years, 1960 to 1992, based on the statistics that we'll look at, looks sweeter than this Nigeria of 1992 to 20.
All right, I don't want you to, to talk about.
But again, let's take a look at what were the visions of Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa when we got into independence on that day. Nigeria's first Prime Minister. What were his thoughts? And also let's take a look at what were the thoughts of President Tinubu when last year. At last, our great day has arrived, and Nigeria is now on the path to greatness. Again, 1st of October 1960, independence implies a great deal more than self-government. 1960 started a new chapter in the history of Nigeria, of the Commonwealth, and indeed of the world. Last year on Independence Day, what were the thoughts of President Tinubu? No one is greater or lesser than the other. This nation belongs to all of us. Some have said that our country will be torn apart. They are forever mistaken. Here our nation stands, and here
we shall remain.
We can do it. We must do it. We shall do it. And that's how President Tinubu's statement ended. We shall do it, we must do it,
and we can do it.
The question Nigerians are asking is, when will we do it? And so we're hoping that on Independence Day next week, the President will answer and provide a lot of information on when
should
will
be,
we
should
do
be this
it.
week.
Should be this week, exactly.
On Tuesday.
In less than 48 hours, like you said. So Nigerians are waiting to really understand when will we do it.
So, Babajide, is there an easy way to actually summarize, Nigeria's challenges, the overall challenges and opportunities in the last 64 years?
Just like I started.
For us to appreciate.
For us to appreciate, just like I started. 64 years represents two halves. First half of 32 years, 1960 to 1992, and the second half of 1992 to 2024. What made me choke in this second half and what made me smile in this first half? Let's take a look at the statistics, because it then provides clarity about our 64-year of independence. As of 1960, 46 million population. Midpoint, 1992, 102 million. In the next 32 years, we've doubled our population, now 240 million. Poverty rate in 1960, no statistical records that are accurate on that. However, the National Bureau of Statistics has information on how many Nigerians were living in poverty in 1992. That was put at 39 million. Now we're looking at a nation in excess of 150 million people that are classified as poor. I have to listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. As at 1960, the equivalent exchange rate of the dollar was 70 kobo to a dollar. What was it in 2024? As at 2024, it was the equivalent of 1,700 kobo. And if we can take a look at the previous slide before this, exactly. 70 kobo in 1960, as at 1992, the equivalent of 17 naira, you heard me right, that's the equivalent of 1,700 kobo. Now we are looking at 165,000 kobo, 1,650 naira. Prime lending rate, 7% as at independence. 1992, based on the economic challenges, 29%, and that's for those that were classified as prime customers. We are still in double digits. Important for Nigerians, and these are statistics for the common man. Petrol then per liter as an independence, the equivalent of less than 1 kobo. 1992, you could buy a liter of petrol for 70 kobo. You heard me right, 70 kobo. 32 years after, we're like now at 895 naira in kobo terms. That is 89,500 kobo. So these are the critical statistics for the common man. Population has increased significantly. A lot more Nigerians are poorer, and things are more difficult to afford because of the exchange rate. And a classic example, which we've compared in these two halves, is petrol.
So what should government really focus on now, especially in these tough times?
The president seems to have a clear vision. Now it is what will be the next mission. One of the first ways to look at it is what sort of Nigeria do we want to have, especially if we've looked at 62 years back and we feel that Nigeria is still punching below its capacity. So the question now, Ayotunde, is what will Nigeria look like in another 64 years? So what's the vision? If we take a look at some of the critical indicators, in another 64 years, where will Nigeria be? And if we take a look at that vision, based on our current population growth rates, 2%, 2.5%, Nigeria will be at a population growth of at 850 million Nigerians. And if you bring up that vision board, which was the previous slide before we get into this, the population, estimated population as at 2088. Estimated population as at 2088, 850 million Nigerians. It is expected that if our vision goes right, we'll reduce population living in poverty to less than 50 million. It is expected if everything goes right, we'll reduce our lending rate to as low as 5%.
All right, so a whole lot to unpack there. But of course, this will be President Bola Tinubu's second Independence Day speech. What do you expect on Tuesday?
So on Tuesday, Ayotunde, a lot of Nigerians, for the very first time, almost everything everybody says will be correct. Apart from the president's speech, we expect a lot of other dignitaries to make statements. And if you take a look at our expectations and why we feel that what everybody will say perhaps will be right, is we're expecting beyond the president's speech, what will the former President Olusegun Obasanjo say if he were to issue statements? Clearly, it will be talking about being dissatisfied about leadership. Atiku Abubakar, from his statements and looking at his trends, is expected to talk about uninspired governance. Peter Obi is likely to talk about his doubts, yet is hopeful. The Minister of Finance, Wale Edun, is likely to talk about him being optimistic. We're looking at the chairman of the group's CEO of the NNPC talking about him being confident about the state of affairs of the country. The military Chief of Defense Staff, General Musa, is likely to talk about the secured future. The president is going to talk about better days ahead. However, the most important is what will the common man be talking about? And if we look at the trends, it is likely that the common man will be speechless and might be confused.
We'll definitely leave it at that. Of course, interesting times indeed.
Your orange might have a better taste than mine.
You never know. You never know. But we look forward to the Independence Day anniversary. Babajide, thank you once again.
The pleasure is all mine.